And good morning. Welcome to the Old School podcast about the American education system, all of its qualities, its quirks, its traditions, its standby ideas, things that they want to put into place, those that have been put into place and failed miserably, our analysis of the same, and any other musings we have regarding the solutions that could make the American education system just slightly better. Good morning, here, Dr. Bourgeois.
Good morning, here, Miller. I thought we just got on the call here and made jokes. I thought that was our purpose.
We could do that. But you also have to accept the reality that while funny to the two of us, our reach might not be as far as you hoped.
I don't know about that. I think funny is funny, and you're certainly funny here, Miller.
I don't know. There have been times, as Edgar Allan Poe said, we have a singular wit. So, perhaps I'm not as funny as I think I am.
Yeah, and maybe we just laugh at each other. We're not thinking it's funny, but we're laughing at them for even saying it. And that's the laughter you hear on this.
Perhaps that's all this podcast is, simply a self-appreciation venue by which you and I extol each other's senses of humors and witty repertoires and keen insights. Maybe that's what this whole thing is about.
It feels that way, and so people enjoy listening to that, which is sort of odd, but
it is odd.
Well, we've been at this for a while, and it seems that we're coming upon a bit of a anniversary, if I recall.
This is, as we speak, this is the 50th episode of the Old School.
That's
now, it would be interesting to know exactly where, like someone like Joe Rogan was at episode 50. Now, of course, Joe Rogan does have a couple of advantages over us.
A couple? That's all?
Just a couple. Okay. One is he knows famous people, and so. But even in around 50th episode, I think he was still hanging out in the back of comedy clubs, doing interviews with people and what have you. But so perhaps there is room to grow. Of course, there's room to grow. But 50th episode, perhaps we are in good standing. Perhaps.
Well, I sometimes look at the statistics, and that's a lot of episodes, and we've had a lot of downloads. We've touted how we're in multiple continents and countries, so we do have a bit of a reach. We have 8 downloads from Russia, of all places.
Damn good and well, but those are bots. There is no way. It is not possible. It'd be the same thing if you said we had listeners in China. I'm not saying that China can't afford to hear our message, just like I'm not saying that Russia can't afford to hear our message. By the way, we could bring peace to Russia if you just get rid of those yahoos that are causing all the problems.
It wouldn't take long.
It wouldn't take long at all. We'd wrap that thing up in no time. But there is no way in hell that there are actual people in Russia listening to the Old School.
It's not like you can just pass and click through a podcast. I mean, you have to actually listen to it for it to be recognized in these analytics. And I stand by it. We have 8 Russian listeners, and they could be regulars.
Is it like the Germans, though, where they're only listening to like 2% of the show?
No, I missed that statistic. The 2% means they represent 2% of our overall listeners. Because we have a few in Germany, but just 6. We have 1 Frenchman or French woman, 17 in the United Kingdom. That's pretty good. Actually,
I'd like to think it's a French woman.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go with that.
Yes.
But we're popular in India. We have 13. A couple in Iran. So we're popular with we're popular with the Persians, I guess.
No way in God's green earth, for the love of ice cream. You cannot possibly imagine. Now, the French woman I'm going to buy.
What?
And I may even send a personal message. Si tu peux parler français, si possible, de dire bonjour. But Iran, Oh, yeah, I guess maybe so.
Yeah, it's a
I guess it's
cosmopolitan
possible.
area.
I'm still not buying the Russia bit, but
Well, you should. There's one from Kenya and Australia. We have 6. So
I wonder who that one in Australia. I do know a few people in Australia, so it is possible. I am going to buy that one too. And for our friends in Australia, good day, mate. So that's
no. This is
no.
where I'm just kind of laughing at you, not with you, Herman.
Are you telling me Australians don't really say that?
You're not going to do no, and you're not going to do this for every country. Kind of try to,
I'm going to
fashion
find
that.
out. I'm going to find out how to say "welcome to the old school" in Hindi, because apparently, although they probably speak English since they're listening to the podcast.
Everybody does. Who doesn't? What about, we have a couple of listeners in Japan. I know you know a little Japanese.
I do know a little Japanese. I have spent. I was there on 3 different occasions. The first of which was perhaps not the most culturally rewarding experience in Japan, as I was in the military, but still, it was a great time to be had by all, and I enjoyed it. So, yeah. Konnichiwa. Kinki desu ka? So
I'm surprised you mentioned you had radio silence about a lot of those years here, Miller. You've admitted now that you've been in Japan.
I've been, as in the words of the great poet Johnny Cash, I've been everywhere. So 27 countries and counting, I believe. So
that's made up right there.
No. So I was in Japan, like I said, 3 times. Once with the military, checking out the stylistic musings of Okinawa, and then twice in quote unquote mainland Japan, even though Japan doesn't technically have a mainland. It's just a bunch of islands still. I think we all get the picture. 2 times in the island of Honshu in the city of Nagaoka. So
you're making these things up, and I'm believing it because I don't know any better.
I've been all over the world. So I mean, so certainly it's possible that our appeal could be international. I was about to say my appeal, but I'm sure you have some as well.
I'm pretty big with the Russians, I've heard. That's what I
say that too loud. We're going to get canceled.
Yeah, that would be great. I would consider that a badge of honor.
It might up the listenership if we got canceled.
Yeah,
maybe we should say we got canceled.
Yeah, some stunt like that is about the only thing that will save us. Taking drastic measures. So I guess we do have a topic, but the topic is our podcast. And way back when we had some goals, and you say all this stuff at the beginning of the episode. You use the word foible, you talk about musings and so forth, but listening to that, what are we really doing here? Why do we spend an hour every Saturday recording these? What are we hoping to accomplish?
Well, for me, I just think there's a lot of things that parents of school-aged children just don't think about. I mean, there's a lot of machinations that are happening behind the scenes, sometimes on stage, but still may not be clear as to what's happening, why it's happening, what is the impact that it has on education. And so, at least from my point of view, I think part of what we're doing here is to be able to explain what their students are experiencing. Is it the best way to experience an education? And if not, what could possibly be a better solution? Now, of course, every solution has to fit the parameters of the reality of a situation. I have been in different schools, from inner city schools to suburban schools to what have you. And so with each school, I think you're going to have different demands. You're going to have different problems to overcome, and you're going to have different ideas. You're going to have different ideas kind of thrown at you as to what works here, what works there. And that's, to some extent, that's what we're doing. We're looking at some of these ideas, some of them time tested and proven, others perhaps more recent in its conception and implementation, but nevertheless, perhaps not a good idea. And so, from a parent point of view, parents have expertise in other areas. It could be education, but more likelihood is in some other field of endeavor. And so for us to be able to apply our craft, to utilize our intellect and experiences to provide insight on what's actually happening in the school, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I think in general, that's what we're doing.
Well, it seems like we're trying to uncover some things that appear obvious, but we're suggesting that they need a harder look. And we have a method to this, and we tend to not just look at outcomes, but look at what it does to the people involved, particularly teachers. So I would say that this podcast is teacher centered. I mean, I look at all those listeners, and we're just guessing. We don't have the analytics behind this to say these are parents listening to us, but many people have multiple roles. So these are teachers who are also parents, or maybe administrators everybody's a parent who listens to us, unless they're maybe our former students who are just getting a kick out of hearing us talk.
Giggling.
Yeah, something like that. But
Mr. Miller's voice sounds funny on the computer.
Yeah. But
for example.
Oh my goodness. But I've heard that you can open up a podcast and actually receive comments and messages and find out who's, engage with the folks. We intentionally didn't want to do that. We wanted this to be a one-way conversation because we don't want to get our dander up, arguing with people. It doesn't seem to have a point. So we're laying out a case. We're basing it on our experience, our reading, research that we've done, and hopefully we've made a few points multiple times. It seems like we do that. We come back to testing a lot, and we're trying to uncover some of the hidden costs of doing school is done today.
Well, I think initially the reason why we did not have a mechanism by which someone could comment is that both you and I are remarkably ignorant on how to do that.
Oh, come on. I work with technology all day. I'm tech forward.
You're not tech forward.
Oh
if
my
you
gosh.
are, you're hating yourself because of it, I think.
No, if you know the applications I have with my business, I have dashboards. I'm doing coding.
See, the fact that you called it applications, and you might as well have said I'm on the World Wide Web, because all the cool kids are saying apps.
Well, come on. Applications are platforms that I use for my business. I'm not physically coding, but I'm doing a lot of complicated things and using the work of others and calling it my own, essentially. But yeah, I think we should maybe revisit that. What are your thoughts now about comments? Because I know the people listening, they've built up over 50 episodes. The idea that I want to tell them something, they're flat out wrong. Maybe
the amount of times that listeners have been tapped into our podcast, maybe while in the car, just like punching the dashboard and the steering wheel.
Well, that's what we're looking for. Or a few people just saying, yeah, right. And they say it, I've been thinking it, but they said it finally. That's what we're hoping.
Can we just leave it at that?
Just us fantasizing about who, the audience.
Do they all agree with us?
Yeah.
Well, the problem is we would need a social media presence with regards to the podcast so that people could comment. Are you willing to go down that road?
No, I think the platform itself has features for comments, because I turned it off. It was a default setting, and we definitely turned that one off. But I think it depends on the platform. But podcasts are ubiquitous, and people comment on podcasts. But that's a way to build listenership, build interest. But you have to be willing to read some things that you don't want to hear.
Oh, God. All right, fine. I'll do it.
professors out there who will think that they're taking us to task, and saying, you don't understand this problem. It's a real simplified argument the two of you are making, and here's why. Kind of ostentatious.
Would we have to respond to every comment?
It would be really weird if they wrote comments and we didn't,
Even the dumb comments?
Well, they could message with each other, but it's not like we're rock stars here, and it's not like we'd get that many comments. You could just say, nice point, thanks, every time. How about that?
I appreciate your support.
That's right.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, and there wouldn't be many more listeners. We could alienate people with our comments.
Or we can hire like an 18-year-old, or you're
saying that an 18-year-old has the ideas and could hold up to professorial comments. I mean, they could help.
If all we're saying is thank you for listening or appreciate your support.
That was totally joking. But the thing is, I would say 40% maybe of the things that we talk about we disagree. Maybe 30. It depends on what we're getting into. So we don't have a response combined. So that would be a little odd, because you would respond and then I would say, well, that's a pile of crap. What he's thinking is totally stupid. Here's the real ansser. So we'd be arguing with each other.
You ignorant? No.
Yeah, it would be just us, bickering, kind of like we do now, but it would be now in writing and a little bit more public.
We could be like the modern day podcast version of The Odd Couple. And we have had previous supervisors who have suggested the same, that you and I were some sort of don't you have a cough button?
No.
Okay.
Coughing right in there. Felix and Oscar.
Yeah, we could be Felix. I think it's clear that you are Felix.
Yes, I was like Felix.
I'm more of the slovenly, sports obsessed Oscar, the man's man, common man's man, a member of the hoi polloi.
So how did we get to talking about Oscar Madison? We had a point a minute ago. Yeah.
Well, what I'm saying is I think part of the reason why people like to tune in, for those who do, I think part of the reason they like it is because of the interaction between you and I. And I think part of that interaction has a odd couple like dynamic to it. And perhaps that has also been a definition of our friendship over the years, that we are very much not the same kind of people, yet somehow we still find plenty in common. So
that is the case. And so we're also incredibly respectful of each other. I mean,
in all seriousness.
Yeah. And that's just how we roll. But imagine us in the public debate. I would probably lose patience pretty quickly, but maybe not. I mean, the thing is, we have some really intelligent people, and we know who a lot of them are, who have sent some comments offline, and we have some regular listeners who, after every episode, will message us, and so that conversation is really, really valuable. But maybe it should be kept private, as opposed to going out, because
here's the problem with comments.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. The problem with comments, at least how it plays itself out, like you said, we have a much more elevated, a much more dignified group of listeners, not the sort to resort to some of the antics you might find in other comment sections and other mediums.
Right. Yeah. These are grown-ups.
Yes. So perhaps, now that I think about it upon further reflection,
yeah,
perhaps this is exactly the kind of people. Until we start getting big like Joe Rogan, then I think you're going to see a drop in the average anything, So I mean, as long as we got our core group here in the beginning, but I think once you get as big as Joe Rogan, which I assume we will be here in the few years, perhaps we stop listening to comments at that point.
Well, let's explore it.
Okay.
But it's a relevant debate, and pretty soon, at some point, and I'm not sure when for you, but we'll be out of the classroom, and assuming we continue doing this, 3, 4, 5 years into the future, we'll definitely be two outsiders. I mean, I'm in education, my business, and but it would be great to hear from people. I mean, and we've talked about having guests, and we really need to do more of that.
True.
We need to hear from some of these people who are in the trenches, maybe who have a different experience than us. Maybe in the elementary university setting.
Well, we tried this before. I do have, and you have contacts certainly at the university level.
Yeah,
it has been a rather comical continuing joke about the notion of getting elementary school teachers on here, because that does not seem possible. But who knows? I don't know. I like the idea, though, especially of getting more guests, if for no other reason but to break up the monotony of listening to the two of us talk all the time.
Yeah, it's got to be old at some point, for sure. But I really enjoy quizzing you about teaching, because you're in the classroom and like, for example, this weekend.
For 6 more months, I'm in the classroom.
Okay.
Maybe.
So you can't announce that officially until it's been decided here, Miller.
Well, I don't think that was an official announcement. I didn't step up to a podium, for example. But
the name of our platform is Podium.
Okay. Sorry.
No, not really. But so you're a full-time teacher, and this is your weekend. So are you going to watch sports all day today and all day tomorrow? Is that how it works?
Nope. Well, normally that might be how it works, but it's not working that way this weekend.
Oh, what would you have to be doing this weekend?
Well, this weekend, as we talked about, I think last week or 2 weeks ago or whatever, I'm grading essays. So I came home yesterday from school with about 150 essays under my arm, and that's what I was doing the minute before you and I touched base prior to this podcast. 1 minute after this podcast is completed and our phone call is over, I will be going back to the essays. And so, we talked about the idea about what teachers do, and, especially like in other countries where, teachers have home offices, but it's not like for show. They actually work in the home offices, So that's what my home office is used for. I kind of flutter around the house as far as where I grade my essays, but it includes my home office, and this is part of the gig. I mean, certainly if you're going to be teaching history or language arts or what have you, essays are a part of it's an occupational characteristic is grading essays, and so that's what I'm going to be doing this week. I have a friend of mine from Ecuador. She was telling me, she says, "Can't you just have someone else look at them, help you out?" And I was like, "No, it doesn't work that way." And then she said, "Can't you just skim it?" And I said, "No, can't skim it, because you can't skim, because if you do that, then on what basis are you making comments to try to improve the kid as a history writer?" So there's a lot that goes into it, and it's a tedious, mind-numbing, on some level, exercise, made more problematic by the fact that I don't have much of an attention span. And so I have to kind of break my essay up. I had to break it up a little bit, where maybe I do 15 at a time and then have a 30-minute break and do another 15. And it seems like it's not very productive or efficient, but it's my system. So.
Well, I picture you watching LSU while you're grading, at least having it on mute and then turning it up when it gets interesting, and hopefully not writing comments about the officials in your notes to your students.
I can't say that's never happened.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you've just identified a potential business venture, and maybe this is what you'd like to do long term, is grade papers. Why not outsource it to experts and scale it up, and they can be the graders, and the teacher can spend their time preparing to teach. And
just wonder what would be the cost of
Oh,
getting someone else to read 150 essays. I know one thing.
yeah.
I would not do that.
Would you pay for it? Okay. How much would you pay if you had a history teacher of high caliber who would grade these papers for you, these 120 papers? What would you pay them?
It'd probably have to be per essay, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
Would
yeah.
the would the scale be per essay?
Yeah. So let's say you have 100. What would you? Yeah. What would you pay?
God bless it. That's a lot of money.
Well, $100. I didn't say
Well,
a
no,
dollar. I think it would be more than that.
if you're
Because
talking about that, what are we talking about? Like $5 an essay?
how much is it? How much time does it take you to grade an essay?
When I'm on a roll, it takes me about 2 minutes.
2 minutes? This is superficial grading.
No, it's
You're
not
probably
superficial
grading
grading.
now. When I make a speech on this show, you're probably reading an essay. That's,
When I'm grading an essay,
yeah.
the initial reading of it takes about 2 minutes, and then I have comments, and then I make suggestions that might take another 5 minutes, and then I'm off to the next paper.
So 8 minutes per essay, and that's really a superficial reading here, Miller. I think you'd spend more time. But if we're paying somebody for 10 minutes, they could do 6 an hour, something like that. And I bet you do about 10 an hour. Is that right?
I do between 10 to 15 an hour. Yeah.
Okay. So we're narrowing in on what we would,
But
pay
it couldn't
them.
be me. That's why I could never do, like, for example, for the AP classes, they have readers.
Right.
And so during the summer, a bunch of AP US history teachers gathered together somewhere. I think it's Kansas City this year, or maybe that's World History, this meeting in Kansas City. But then they just basically take over a hotel, and then they take over all the various, the Alamo room, and so many other different rooms that are in the hotel lobby area. And then they just sit there and they grade for 8 to 10 hours a day, going through, anywhere between 800 to 1,000 essays per day. And it's a shocking number to me. I cannot imagine a hell more demoralizing than that. It's the one part of my job I hate the most.
But they do they don't get paid for that, do they?
Oh, yes, they do get paid a little bit.
AP
Yes,
graders get a stipend.
that's what it amounts to. It's a stipend. Now it's a nice stipend. It's a couple $100 or something like that. But it's and you're also somewhere else. Get you out of the house for a little bit. But
you learn about the AP test, and but also these are blind grading, and they have multiple graders on each paper, don't
right.
they?
Well, not necessarily on the same paper.
Yeah.
So so the readers are broken up into tables. Each table has a table leader, and then has a handful of other teachers grading. Then they just basically start reading. They grab a bunch of essays and they start reading. If there are questions about an essay, a reader can ask another reader. If there's a conflict between those two ideas, then the table reader gets into it. Although the vast majority of the essays are essays that are mostly agreed upon, so there's not much controversy, but it does happen on a regular basis. So, and then that's how they work through the through the essays. The table reader is responsible for getting with other table leaders and kind of like the head of it. If there's any adjustment that needs to be made as to how certain essays are graded, then that is done as well. So it's a kind of a multi-layered, and you got people at home grading. They're grading maybe short answer essays or short answer questions. And these papers are coming from all over the country, all over the world, because international schools do AP classes as well. So it's a fairly cosmopolitan, multi-layered, highly efficient setup that goes through the essays at the end of the year.
Well, the whole idea of that and the underlying goal is to give each student for each test a 1, 2, 3, 4, or a 5 for
Correct.
the full test. And they're not going to get any feedback. They just get the number, and the teachers get the number. I mean, there are times when you get to look at their responses for the open-ended, but they don't get feedback. So it's just taking something and putting a number on it. You wonder if a computer at some point would be able to grade an AP essay, because they are so structurally similar student to student, that could happen at some point, which makes this even more absurd. That all of that work to just get a number, and the student then has this AP score. And I think what we've been saying all along is that it might be nice to let students know a little something. I mean, those comments you're making, I think, are important. They may not read them, but
there's that too. So
at least you're trying. Anyway, it's a huge task, and ultimately, it's trying to take something and turn it into a number.
Yes, when it comes down to it, when it comes down to brass tacks, it is a number between 1 and 5. And as far as like feedback, I mean, there certainly are some superficial feedback that a kid could potentially get. As far as like the breakdown of their grade, I think that's what they see, or they can see.
Do they get that? So they know about the open-ended, the whatever for you, the document analysis?
I must admit, I'm not 100% sure about that. I don't think that
so
they
clearly you
receive
don't
too
get
much.
it. I mean, because if you could get it, you would be acting on it, because maybe your students are doing well on the multiple choice, but not on the rest. You don't even get that as a teacher. Is that right?
But see, the thing is that when it comes to the scores, I'm even slow on reading what the scores are, because at some level, it's not that I don't care, but anything that they do on an essay and on the AP exam, whether they're good at this or bad at that, I already know that answer, because I've been doing essays with them over the course of the last year. I have no reason. I mean, some people do look at it, but I have no particular reason to spend a lot of time looking at the particulars of a kid's score. I already know what they do. I already know what it's going to look like, unless they do something remarkable between the last essay I give them and then several weeks later when they do the AP exam. I mean, I already have a fairly good idea about what they're going to do. So As far as like looking at the AP scores when they come out, usually they come out the first week of July. If I have a desire to see more than just their overall grade, okay, I could do that, but I don't know. I just don't feel a particular reason to do it.
Well, I have a question. I used to do something, and probably you've done this too, where you do Scantron. You scan multiple choice items, and before you look at the name on it and you scan it, say there are 50 questions, you guess what you anticipate the score, and then for me, I'm within 2 points on about 90% of them, because I see the kids, I know what they're going to have, and there are no surprises, or rarely, maybe just for a few. Mm-hmm. Is there ever a misalignment between how the students do in your course and then suddenly they ace, get a 5, or worse yet, get a 2 or a 1 when you expected a 4? How much do they keep on what your expectations were?
Well, this goes a little bit into what we talked about in the last episode or 2 episodes ago, where a lot of my students have access to Quizlets online. Right. And we talked about the idea that how during quizzes I will change things up as far as the actual question goes, to try to make sure that indeed they do know what they're talking about. And then on the tests, kids are memorizing questions, and so I think there are some kiddos who do well in the class, but don't necessarily do well in the AP exam. Or more likely to happen, they do well on multiple choice questions, but they do poorly on, say, essays.
Okay, well, that you could run some numbers, and I may want to study this, because it's pretty straightforward. If you can run a correlation, I mean, a student's grade in a class is on a scale of 0 to 100, right?
Right.
And then the AP is on a 1 to a 5. And so
Correct.
you could certainly, I mean, these are scaled variables. You could run a correlational analysis overall and by teacher and find out which teachers are, underperforming and overperforming, and what the association is with those scores. But I think it is relevant because it leads back to some extent to the teacher, and are they assessing well, during that school year?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one of the things that, there's a lot of dynamics that goes into, looking at scores. Again, this is stuff we talked about before, but I mean, the notion of competition that kind of creeps into it, at least from the school level. And so, yes, I mean, there's a lot of ways that an inventive, creative kid can find to get around the work associated with an AP class. Now, it doesn't particularly help them when they go in front of the test, but I mean, it certainly is something that they could spend time doing. And teachers have a choice. They can either kind of spin around like a rabbit or a hamster on a wheel trying to find the different ways that a kid is cheating or can cheat. Or at some point, you just do your job. You do it to the best of your ability, and you hope that they get something out of it. You hope that they take the most honest approach to it. But ultimately how they choose to use it and how they choose to interact with it is largely out of your control. And so to a certain extent, it's not that I'm ambivalent to what's happening. On the contrary. However, I think that there's a limit to which you can affect change with that. And so I do what I can as far as what I have the ability and the time and the effort to do. And talking about how we kind of mess with the quizzes a little bit, try to keep them guessing a little bit. But, again, kids will continually try to find the shortcuts. And ultimately, it is their legacy as to how that all plays out.
Well, grading is really something that we come back to a lot, and we have for these 50 episodes, and assessment certainly. I don't know if I've given this example, but maybe it's new. Sometimes we run into something new under the sun here. But I remember students, who potentially are doing really poorly out of the gate, and then improve over time. And you've talked about that in your class. There's something about getting that first win, for a student where they do well, and then something changes, and then they, imagine ninth graders in high school, they get off to a bad start. I hope that's something that happens, that you see, because you mentioned before that traditionally your first test is students do poorly and then they get better. And we've talked about how parents react in your conversations. But is that the case, that when they're in your class, they figure it out? And when does it kind of click in?
Well, it depends on the student. It is a kind of a joyous thing, and it is perhaps one of the more rewarding aspects of this job is when a kid does get it, or when a kid does figure out how to write an essay, how to create an argument, how to provide proof, how to provide connections within an essay, or simply in the understanding of the day-to-day happenings within the classroom. That's part of that realization of how to think historically. And so, yes, that it is an amazing experience to see, and it is affirming in many ways, both for myself personally, but certainly to the perseverance of the kid who decides they're not going to give up, but they're going to try to figure out a way to understand what's happening. And so on those merits, I mean, yes, it's a pretty rewarding experience to see.
Well, as you kind of hit the twilight of your teaching, or your approach it at least, those are probably some things that you'll miss, because you don't get that in real life. That kind of interaction. I mean, if you're a coach or a teacher, you do get to see improvement. You have these moments with students where it all kind of comes together, but you have a lot of frustrations along the way. You probably won't miss that, but I imagine that will be something. It took me some time. I've been out of the classroom since, I guess, 2013, I believe, 2012, 2013. And it took a little time to get over that, because you had the rhythm of the school year, you had interactions with students, a lot of people hanging on your every word, all day. And there's something that builds your self-esteem when that happens. But eventually that part fades away, the stress fades away, and you can transition. But it's been such a big part of your life, and it was of mine, that it's, I think that those are the types of things. And then the individual students, for me, there comes a point where you start forgetting their names, and they all kind of become one in a way. But you remember certain students, and you always will, and that says something, because we've been in front of hundreds and hundreds of students over the years. A few of them left their mark, I guess.
Well, I have given some thought to what it means to leave the classroom. And I think when you're younger and you have your entire career ahead of you, you usually think of retirement in one of two ways. Either one, it's just not something you think about because you're committed, devoted to the job. And in your worldview at that particular moment, it is the job. And so to think outside of it is not particularly helpful because you're going to be in it for a while. Or, you're thinking about it as a time to come when you'll be able to step away and maybe do something else, or maybe not do anything at all. But as you get closer to it and you start to consider the things that you're going to miss and the things that you're not going to miss, I think the kids are probably because I like teaching teenagers. I like hanging out with teenagers. I think they're funny. I think they're smart. I think they can provide a certain energy. It certainly keeps me young on a certain level. No matter if my body's breaking down, the knees hurt, the back hurts, the hips hurt, and if I feel old in every other sense of the word, mentally, spiritually, in my heart of hearts, I feel still young. And I think that is a byproduct of hanging out with teenagers all the time. And so you're going to miss that. And the question is, do you start getting older mentally, spiritually, all those other things once you step away? It is a question that I've considered. What does that actually do for me personally to step away from that vibrancy, that energy, that creativity? And not that I don't have other creative, energetic folks around me, adults that I know, but it is something that is a constant source of affirmation. And then there are many kids, more than I ever would have thought, who send emails, write cards, write letters, parents who do the same because either I taught their student or I took their student to Germany or something along those lines, where they've seen a growth, they've seen a maturation, they've seen a kind of better version of their kid that was gained partly from my efforts, either in the classroom or in Germany. And those are, some teachers post those up in their classroom. I don't do that. I hang on to mine, but I don't post them. But they're deeply personal and they're deeply affirming. And it makes you think, okay, I don't suck at my job. Kids are getting something out of it, to hear stories about how what happens in my classroom is the source of dinner table conversation. The idea of, wow, a student suggesting, hey, I had this interest in this topic that we're talking about today. And then you find out later that they and their family decided to go visit someplace that was connected to that interest. And I cannot tell you how many times I received photographs from students as they travel around the world, and they say, hey, here's that painting we talked about that one time in class. And I had two young ladies who took a picture of themselves in front of a painting in the Louvre in Paris. And so, or I had another student who took a picture at the gravesite of Dred Scott's wife, the slave who was the kind of the center of a court case about the nature of slavery right before the war. All these experiences these kids have are either motivated by or enriched by the things that I do in the classroom. And that's a pretty powerful thing.
Oh, it is. It's heady stuff. I know every once in a while we bring up, maybe we haven't, Mr. Holland's Opus, which
Yes.
yeah, you give me a little chuckle, but there is a scene at the end where, for 20, 25 years of teaching, you see an auditorium filled with current and former students,
Right.
packing the auditorium. And I think, a lot of teachers who are retiring they all have a packed auditorium, that is really powerful. And sometimes we get caught up in the current, the school year and those students, but you do have a lot of individuals you've influenced, and they could be, imagine, for everyone, if that happened, seeing the adult that they become. And that's one of the reasons that we teach also, is to see that teenager become a 30-year-old. Now I have former students in their 40s, and really much older, because I taught for a long time.
Right.
But there's something about that, just to, even if it doesn't happen, because it can't probably, but the image of that, is sort of heartening, because you're making a big difference. And I would say a half or a third of those students are really yours, meaning others had other teachers that were, more prominent in their lives, but there is that core in the auditorium that were kind of your people, and you were their mentor.
Well, I think that last scene is kind of a physical representation of what that impact looks like. And like you said, it's not possible for every student or every teacher. And I probably wouldn't want to be a part of that either. I think I'd be very uncomfortable,
Really? I can see you being uncomfortable, but I would just like to see how they all turned out, and
sure, yes.
Wouldn't it be great to have conversations with, all of them? What happened after high school? What was your course of, and it probably has nothing to do with the subject you taught at all,
I think I have seen that, like I said, through messages that students have left. Although, it's just, it is interesting, because if indeed this is my last year, which it looks like it might be, then, that last day of school, where typically they do some sort of, usually at the last day of the school, which is this is only a teacher work day to kind of finalize grades, hand them in, turn in everything, that sort of thing. At our school, they have like a luncheon.
Oh.
And during that luncheon, they will recognize, people reaching milestones of service, like 10 years, 15 years, what have you. And then there's also a special little ceremony for people who are retiring. And there's praise and adulation and, festive atmosphere all around. But if it happens this year, I will not be there that last day, and I'm just fine with that, because
you planned a trip to Europe.
Yes, I have to leave. I have to leave on that last day. So, but I'm okay with that. I find that level of attention drawn to myself very uncomfortable.
Oh yeah,
and we talked about this when I left the job that you and I shared. I basically just told everybody the last day that I was leaving, and then I left. And there was talk about having a chair with balloons attached to it, and and I said, "There's no way in hell I'm sitting in that chair with balloons on it." And then, but also just I still recognize that there's an impact left, and hopefully that can be said of me. Nevertheless, I'm willing to endure the pangs of reminiscence over what I did do and what I did achieve and what I did create, and the influences I might have imparted upon other people. Yet at the same time, look forward to maybe doing something that looks a little bit different, but perhaps just as rewarding.
Well, it's good that you're talking through and preparing. It's not unlike the end of baseball season. It's rather sudden. It stops, right?
Especially if your team's not going into the playoffs, then it stops. Yes, the train hits the final destination rather quickly.
Some of them hit that in July.
Yes. And so, yeah, well, yeah. So luckily for me, my team managed to be relevant up to the very end. And that in and of itself is a remarkable achievement and perhaps signifies a promise of a coming day. But, uh, but yes, the chilled environs of fall bring to a close the baseball, as does the expectancy of summer brings an end to the school year, and in this case, perhaps a career. Yes, who knows? I don't know. Maybe I'm just waxing philosophically.
Well, I was waiting for your next line. That you were elevating to a high level there, when you interrupted yourself with humor.
Well,
Well, with that wonderful speech, we're concluding our 50th episode, and we'll do
50 episodes in the can.
Yeah, in the can, and we'll do 50 more, and
God willing.
we'll see. Yeah, we might get comments from people. We might invite elementary teachers to be interviewed.
It'll never happen.
But either way, you're going to sit through Mr. Miller's opening about foibles, and I'll try to make snarky comments to get us going and off. And then it always, yeah, and then it's like 40 minutes. This one's 51 minutes. That, at least for us, goes by very quickly.
It does.
Hopefully the same experience for the listeners.
Well, with that, we shall say adieu, and I will say auf Wiedersehen, Herr Dr. Bourgeois.
Auf Wiedersehen, Herr Miller.